guess what movie's coming out soon? It's your favorite, God's Not Dead 5. They're on number 5. It's technically called God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. God. All right, I said the last one. I made up the last one, but it really is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. Here's a screenshot of what the trailer of the YouTube video. Like, this is a real thing. It's happening. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this because maybe you're all familiar with the original God's Not Dead, but you have not paid attention to the franchise in a while here. Okay. The parts you need to know is that the main character is a guy named David Hill, who's played by the guy who kind of runs the movie studio. And in the last movie, like God's Not Dead 4, he defended Christian homeschooling against overzealous liberals in Washington who said it's not helping kids. And this time in God's Not Dead 5, he's going to run for Congress against an incumbent who warns people that you can't elect David Hill. He's a Christian nationalist. And I'm going to show you really brief clips because it's fair use. Here's one clip from the trailer.
We must maintain a wall of separation between church and state. Religion has no place in the public square.
As you could tell, the guy speaking is the incumbent who says very sensibly that we need separation of church and state. That's the bad guy. And the guy looking at him with a very serious look is David Hill, who's the Christian who's going to run against him. There's also one more clip I want to show you when they are finally running against each other, when David Hill jumps into the race as a proud Christian who's not afraid to talk about his faith on the campaign trail, much to the chagrin of his campaign manager. They're doing a debate, and the incumbent says, like, don't vote for this guy. He's a Christian nationalist. And here is what David Hill says in response.
Reverend Hill, your beliefs are a textbook example of Christian nationalism.
Whenever anyone of faith promotes a policy that you don't like, you label them a Christian nationalist.
And I'm only showing you those two very brief clips to give you a sense of what this movie is going to be about. Because just from those few seconds, you already know how this story is going to end. You know how it has to end. Also in the movie, that trailer, which you could find on YouTube if you're watching this right now, it is bookended by speeches from Ronald Reagan. There are cameos from Dean Cain, who used to play Superman, and Scott Baio, both of whom have since become like right-wing MAGA cultists. Mike Huckabee makes an appearance as a talk show host. Raymond Arroyo, who's another Fox News guy, he makes an appearance as the moderator of the debate. It's just MAGA cultism down the line. And by the way, what I don't get about this is, what does this have to do with the original God's Not Dead? Because God's Not Dead #1 was about like the Christian student and the atheist college professor duking it out over whether God exists. They're so not talking about that anymore. They're just trying to bank off of the popularity of the name of the first film without really taking anything of that's God's Not Dead. It has nothing to do with that anymore. Like, they're just trying to use the franchise to tell a different story. And so I don't get it. I've said this before, but the guy who made the movie could have literally just spent 2 hours beating a dead horse on camera, and they could have called it God's Not Dead, The Horse Gets It. And that film would be just as subtle as whatever they're doing now. Like, based on the trailer, there is no self-awareness about how white evangelical Christianity has hurt our nation. There's no reference to how white evangelical Christianity or Christian nationalism played a role in the January 6th insurrection attempt. There's no reference to Project 2025, which is an ever-present threat. Nothing about how red states are trying to force people to display the Ten Commandments in public schools, or how white evangelicals are going to use their muscle to elect a convicted felon who broke every one of their so-called values. So I don't know how ignorant and blind they could be to any of this stuff. the only other thing I want to say about this movie, is I don't know how well it's going to do. And I think they don't know how well it's going to do either, because I want to show you some numbers if you haven't seen these before. This is from Box Office Mojo, which covers like the statistics about movies. This is the original God's Not Dead. And if I scroll down here, like to the box office results, look at this number just over my head. This is how much money the film made many, many years ago when this came out. $60 million plus. That's how much money this movie made. And that's a lot of money. That really, God's Not Dead 1 really was a phenomenon when it came out in 2014, 10 years ago. $60 million, that's a ton. But look at this. God's Not Dead 2, when that one came out, this is the one with Melissa Joan Hart playing like a Christian teacher who referenced the Bible in class and then got sued over it. That movie, that one made $20 million, $21 million. Not bad. No complaints. I mean, they made money on that movie, but it's obviously a lot less than the first one. God's Not Dead 3, A Light in Darkness. Where's that one? Here we go. A Light in Darkness. We scroll down here. How much money did that one make? About $6 million. You see where I'm going with this. What about God's Not Dead 4? Which I know none of you even knew that was a movie, but it did. It existed. God's Not Dead 4 was only in theaters for 3 days. It made $1.2 million. So here's my question. At that point, when you're making $1.2 million on these movies, I don't even think you're covering your own costs. The production costs, the cast, whatever their salaries are, the marketing you got to do. There's no way it's all covered by $1.2 million. And that was God's Not Dead 4. How much could they possibly make with God's Not Dead 5? At this point, I have no idea what the purpose of this franchise is, because it's not getting reviews. It's not getting played in a lot of movie theaters. It's not making money for the company. Who are they doing this for anymore? And if you're just doing it for like Christians, why are you trying to keep the God's Not Dead thing going when you could just start a new franchise or something? Like, think smart. I don't get it. Anyway, this movie's going to be in theaters for another 3 days, starting on September 12th. So if you're bored and you hate yourself, I'm sure there's a theater near you that will play it. And if you miss it, I'm sure you could download it somewhere, watch it streaming somewhere like the next week. Because if you blink, it'll be gone. The good news is you won't be missing anything worthwhile.